Good morning, Mr. Whitaker. We're ready for your opening statement.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to endeavor this serious and important display of civics for Iowans and to show how the process works. So my name is Matt Whitaker. I've applied to be on the Supreme Court, and your task is to determine, one, if I'm qualified, and secondly, whether you should submit my name along with others to the governor for his selection. I grew up in Ankeny, was born in Des Moines, didn't have a choice. My mom and dad were from Keokuk, Iowa, in far southeast Iowa. I had the great fortune of being bigger and faster than my peers, and so I was offered a scholarship by Coach Fry to play for the University of Iowa. And it was a great opportunity, but the moment I showed up at campus, I realized that there were 24 other scholarship freshmen that had more talent than I did. So I worked very hard to use my athletic scholarship to pay for schooling. Obviously, I continued to be on the team, but I graduated in 3.5 years from undergrad. By the time I graduated from undergrad, I had almost a year of my MBA completed as undergraduate studies, and then I enrolled in both the MBA program and the law program. I had 2 semesters of law school under my belt when I was a senior on the Iowa football team, and I used that as a stepping stone to accomplish some things in law school. I was a senior associate editor of the Iowa Law Review. I received the Big Ten Medal of Honor, a very prestigious award given to one male and one female student athlete at each member institution of the Big Ten. And like a lot of graduates, my wife Marcy and I decided we would make our living in Minneapolis. So we moved out of state, and for 6 years we tried to make a life in Minneapolis. But then we determined, around the time that David Yepsen was writing his articles about how the last Iowan left should turn out the lights and why would there be any reason for our next generation to live here, we decided to move back to Iowa and be part of the solution. We also brought 2 immigrants to Iowa with us, our son and daughter, Calvin and Allison. So they are native Minnesotans. We have 1 native Iowan in our family, in addition to Marcy and I. In Minnesota, my law practice was mostly corporate and transactional. I was at 2 large firms in Minneapolis, and then I was in-house counsel at a large Fortune 100 company where I did almost exclusively mergers and acquisitions and corporate law. I also had a small portfolio of retail related work. We then, after moving back to Iowa, I joined the Finley Law Firm and learned how to be a trial lawyer. There is no greater training ground than Finley Alt Smith. They're great people, great trial lawyers, and I learned a lot from those folks. I also participated in a statewide campaign for treasurer, which was unsuccessful, and one of the accomplishments, though, and one of the things I did, was I visited all 99 counties in the course of 9 days, and that was, I do not recommend that, although it is possible, as long as you spend about a half hour in each county seat and a half hour for drive time, and you allow about 12 hours to accomplish that goal. I then had the great opportunity to be appointed by the President and Senate confirmed to be United States Attorney. And a lot of my accomplishments as United States Attorney, and that I've mentioned in my materials, were not sole accomplishments. I am not a one-wolf pack. I have worked with people to get big goals accomplished. One of the biggest goals that I was able to accomplish as United States Attorney was we opened up and staffed a Council Bluffs office. I looked, along with others, and was quite frankly lobbied by the folks in Council Bluffs that I should bring prosecution and prosecutors to Southwest Iowa. And so we looked at it and we realized 20% of our caseload was coming from Southwest Iowa, and we had no location in Southwest Iowa to service those prosecutions. And so I worked with the courts, with the U.S. Marshal Service, and with the stakeholders, including the Chamber of Commerce of Council Bluffs, the county attorneys in Southwest Iowa, to open up that office and to put a prosecutor that lived and worked in Southwest Iowa in Council Bluffs. And I'm proud of that accomplishment, but I did not do it alone, and it was not solely my idea. I will tell you, as U.S. Attorney, one of the significant functions, as Mr. Dummermuth mentioned yesterday, is to manage budgets and to administrate the office. I hired attorneys and staff. I managed an almost $4 million budget, and I was able to inspire, motivate, and otherwise cajole career federal prosecutors and staff to accomplish important goals. That is a great professional office. I'm proud of my service with those folks, and really they did all the work, and I was there to help lead the effort. After I was U.S. Attorney for 5.5 years, the day after I was replaced by the current administration, I opened up my own law firm together with some other lawyers, and I've been practicing law for almost 1.5 years now, primarily in state court and primarily criminal law. I represent 2 of the largest participants in the Iowa Film Tax Program that have been charged criminally, and I also am involved in a very large antitrust case in the Northern District of Iowa in front of Judge Bennett. And so that's what I do now currently professionally. Some of the things that I think I could bring to the Iowa Supreme Court that may be unique, although I understand that most of the candidates that have sat here in this chair have described themselves as unique, so that may be an overused word. But I think I bring strong administrative experience, not just my time as U.S. Attorney, but I'm also a small business owner. And I don't just own part of my law firm. I also own, together with others, but a majority interest in a daycare in my hometown, a trailer manufacturing and sales company in Adel, Iowa, and I also am a member of a bank board of directors, and I think that gives me a perspective into business and how the law affects business, and also how small business owners work and make money, and how they serve their communities and actively participate in what makes Iowa great. I think I have legal skills that are proven. I have tried cases in both federal and state court. I have also argued appellate court arguments, but those were all exclusively in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Finally, I have strong personal relationships both with the legislature and the current executive branch that I think would help the court accomplish the important goals that are currently pending in front of them. And then finally, I know it's been dismissed as maybe insignificant experience, but I have taught twice in my career, once as a teaching assistant at the University of Iowa, and then most recently this last fall, I have taught business law to non-lawyers. And I think that is a unique perspective that I bring to this opportunity. The final thing before I open it up to your questions that I'd like to mention is I've received a lot of support from friends and colleagues and the like, and the 2 were exceptional, and one was from Bruce Kelly, the CEO of EMC Insurance, who described me as one of the most qualified candidates of my generation, and that was really overwhelming and very humbling. And then second, Governor Ray wrote a letter that really touched my heart and was very humbling because of who Governor Ray is and what a great ambassador for Iowa he has been. And he is a meaningful person in my life, and I care a lot about him. So in conclusion, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your service on this commission, and I would ask this commission that I be placed on the final list of 9 that is put forward to the governor. And I now open it up to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Why don't we start on this side of the table? Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Mr. Whitaker, thank you for your application. You have an impressive background.
Thank you.
I was sorry to see I didn't get a letter from Hayden Fry, but I'm sure he supports your candidacy.
I did not ask everybody I know to write letters.
He just wanted the autograph.
Yeah. But certainly, if I were to be fortunate enough to be on the Iowa Supreme Court, that would be a positive event for the University of Iowa football program. That's not why I'm here today, though.
Right. My question for you is, you did an outstanding job as United States Attorney, and you've now shifted to the private practice. You're new to the defense practice. And assure me that if you were on this court, that you would give criminal defendants a fair shake if their case was on appeal.
Well, I would, and I know looking you in the eyes is not going to give you the assurance you're looking for, but let me give you an example. Being a defense lawyer after being a prosecutor for 5.5 years, I think has given me a better perspective as to the impact that charging decisions have on individuals, even before they go to trial and even before they are either acquitted or convicted. So I think I have a greater appreciation for really the power of the sovereign to merely charge crimes. And I will tell you that I think that will serve me well when I am hopefully fortunate enough to serve on the Supreme Court. And I would tell you that if nothing else, I would bring a open-minded, fair approach to the court.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Redenbaugh?
Mr. Whitaker, thank you for your application and for being here today. And I enjoyed our interview over the telephone.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't make the drive.
That's okay. I see that in 2005 you were on a task force for the Iowa Bar Association, I believe, for security in our courthouses.
Yeah, Court Security Task Force, correct.
Yes. Because of the budget constraints and so forth, that's come up a couple of times by some of our district court judge candidates. I wondered if you had any recommendations and if there are any of those that you see that could be implemented even with the budget constraints, or if the budget is an issue, or just give us some of your recommendations.
Sure. I was most recently in the Dallas County Courthouse, where there is a security screening process, but it did not seem as rigorous or otherwise protected as the Polk County Courthouse, where I've spent a lot of time recently, and certainly not as protected as the federal courthouse. And what we reviewed in that security task force was that we had courthouses without any protection, and quite frankly, that resources should be allocated to that important protecting judges and protecting staff and protecting litigants, quite frankly. And so, my experience on that courthouse task force has demonstrated to me that the courts need to advocate for that important issue, and that hopefully I could be a part of that solution, because all Iowans, and this goes back to my Council Bluffs opening that staffed office, is all Iowans pay taxes, all Iowans deserve the same services, and we shouldn't have anything inferior in any county courthouse around our state.
Mr. Brody? Or, okay, your hand, it's like an auction, remember?
Yeah, don't fight over it.
Like an auction, you raise your hand, it's your bid.
That's right. One wink and you're on the hot seat. Thanks, Mr. Whitaker, for your application. I was wondering, given the results of last year's retention election and recognizing that the Supreme Court already engages in public outreach, what additional steps do you think the court could take in terms of public outreach to help Iowans understand what it is we do as lawyers and what the court does on behalf of the citizens of the state of Iowa?
Sure. First of all, I think it's important to point out that the retention vote, we learned that although the judiciary is independent from the other two branches of government, they certainly are not completely independent from the people of Iowa. And so what I could do on an outreach front is, first, I've already done it as U.S. Attorney. I have gone around and built relationships with sheriffs and police chiefs and county attorneys and the like, where I was able to oftentimes hear them tell me that I was the first U.S. attorney they'd ever met. And so I realized that work is ongoing, and those relationships not only need to be built, but they need to be maintained. And I would bring that same attitude of meeting and building relationships with the stakeholders of the Iowa Supreme Court and the Iowa court system. I would also acknowledge the fact that the court will endure. We have had constitutional crises before. Our state and at a federal level, we've had decisions and opportunities that not everyone agreed with. And you know what? Our system endures. And so I believe that we have a great court system. I believe that with the proper care and attention that we can return the court system to its proper place in the state of Iowa, and I would love to be part of that effort.
Mr. Brody?
And Dan and I tend to build on each other's questions, and so I'll take it.
You're not sharing notes, are you?
Nothing being passed back and forth.
Trust me, we can't read each other's writing, so I know that there's no way. I'm trying to read. Anyway, build on that just a little bit. To your final comments is what I want to know, because you made similar comments to that in your material. Can you expand upon if there's been an instance, either at the state level, probably more interested at the state level or at the federal level, where you felt challenged when there was a difference between your personally held beliefs and what your duties were as an officer of the court or an officer of the country.
Sure. As the United States Attorney, certainly I set priorities and follow the priorities of the administration. But we had a unique case in southeast Iowa where an individual put his car into a family planning clinic. And so we had to analyze whether the FACE Act, the Free Access to Clinics Act, applied, and it is valid federal law, and I was happy to enforce that law against that individual that had violated the act. And so that's one clear example where my personal beliefs may be inconsistent, but I had no problem following the law and enforcing the law.
I have a question to go back to security before we get too off it. I don't know if you're aware, but we don't own any of the courthouses around the state.
Mhm.
We're provided space by the Board of Supervisors in East County. With the passage of this new gun law, there's a question whether or not guns can be allowed in courthouses around the state. We've come across a problem because I think you might agree with me that guns probably don't belong in courthouses, especially during divorces and.
Certainly police officers and sworn officials
I'm talking about
do
litigants.
carry. Right.
And one of the problems we're having is that the Board of Supervisors around the state are voting to allow guns in those courtrooms. I mean, how do you handle that?
Well, this is, again, the Supreme Court can only do so much. And this is where the issue clearly could be raised by the people advocating on behalf of the courts and the court system, which seems to me should be the Iowa Supreme Court. And quite frankly, part of the outreach that I discussed with Dan should be done on this important issue because in my experience, litigation is oftentimes intense and oftentimes brings out sometimes the worst in people. And I think we need to have the proper security, and it seems to me that I don't think it would be a problem that in courthouses, because of the unique business that's transacted in those buildings, that guns should be restricted.
Even if you don't make the final 9 or make it to the court, we may be calling on you.
That's, I'm happy to help. I'm trying to, as I demonstrated, I'm trying to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah. We've advocated with the Board of Supervisors, but they're elected locally and have to answer to their local electorate. Let me go this side. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good morning, Mr. Whitaker.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
In the spirit of full disclosure, I should probably tell you and all the commissioners I'm a rabid Hawkeye football fan.
Well, God bless you for that.
And I don't know.
In that case, I brought Bobby Hansen with me.
Well, I've seen him shoot a few jump shots. I've never seen him take down a Big Ten running back or receive a pass like you have.
That's unfair, though, because he's my neighbor.
Mr. Whitaker, I want to thank you for coming here to see us today. This is an important process. I think someone of your stature and talent in coming here validates in some respect what we're doing, and that is trying to find the most talented, qualified people to be on our Supreme Court. I want to ask you a little bit about your appellate experience. Mm-hmm. You have considerable prosecutorial experience, lots of experience with a great law firm here in town. Now you're creating your own, what will soon be a great law firm.
We like to think we're great.
Yes. But help me out a little bit with your experience in the appellate system, brief writing, that kind of thing.
Sure. I would tell you that I argued, I think, 5 or 6 appeals that came out of my office, and I handled those appeals personally, and I thought that was an important growth opportunity for my legal career. I also firmly believed, and the reason I tried cases as the U.S. Attorney, is that if you expect the people that you lead to do the job, you should be able to do the job yourself. I think that is important. I was not afraid to get in the courtroom, and I looked for those opportunities. As you know, over 95% of federal charges, as Guy probably knows, end up pleading. And so there's very few opportunities to really get good trial experience. And I was able to take that opportunity, argue appeals, and do trials. From a brief writing perspective, most of my writing was on law review, where I did that, and I've done a significant amount of writing currently in the private practice. I do not think that I wrote any appeals briefs. I certainly reviewed and had input as to the line assistance, but you know, from a brief writing experience, I do not have a lot of that.
I see that Bobby's here. Is Dolph in the house?
No, no. I asked a lot of my friends to experience this with me, and it's not necessarily that I just thought this was an important exercise in civics, and if they could just participate and observe, I thought that was very important for a lot of Iowans, and I wish more people would come and watch these proceedings, because I think this is a really neat experience and a neat process, and I like sharing it with my friends and family. I wish I would have brought my kids, but my wife and I concluded that they wouldn't listen to their dad anyway, and secondly, they're probably important they were at school.
Mr. Pace?
Thank you, Justice Wiggins. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have written down as one of the people that we should look to for information about you, Judge Longstaff. I have an enormous amount of respect for him, and he has a great reputation as a judge. And if we were to call him and ask him about Matt Whitaker, what would he say about you?
Well, I tried 2 cases in front of Judge Longstaff, and I think Judge Longstaff would say, first of all, that he wished he would have hired me as a law clerk. He was the only judge I applied to. In fact, he asked me to apply to him and then didn't hire me as his law clerk, and so I moved to Minneapolis in protest. But I think he would say that I'm a high-integrity person. I'm a prepared litigant and advocate, and that hopefully he will say that I sought justice. Wasn't merely a litigant in a piece of litigation, that I truly sought justice as U.S. Attorney. And so those are the things that I would hope he would say. And I know he's a huge Hawkeye fan also, so he would probably mention that as well.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Walker, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Sorry we didn't get to meet before today. In your materials, you stated that you were uniquely positioned to help the court reach out to Iowans that believe the court has wandered beyond its constitutional authority. Can you just kind of expand on that for me?
Sure. Well, there were, in the retention vote, there were 50+% of people that disagreed with something the court did. I think each one had a unique reason why they voted against retention, but in a binary choice, they voted that the judges, the 3 judges that were not retained, did not deserve to be retained. And so I think an inference can be made that those people need to be reached out to, need to be communicated to, and quite frankly, they're smart. Iowans are smart and sophisticated, and I think that they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish and sent a message to the Iowa Supreme Court that things needed to change. Now, we can all have our opinions as to what the message was, but clearly there is more than half of Iowans are disconnected in some manner from the courts. And I think I would have a unique opportunity because of where I come from and sort of my perspective on the courts and the law, that I could accomplish that outreach and would be happy to do it on behalf of the Iowa Supreme Court if I'm fortunate enough to be selected.
Thank you.
Mr. Mickelson, you had the last question.
Thank you. Is that your Rose Bowl ring?
It is, Big Ten Championship and Rose Bowl ring, and I bring it out for special events.
Oh, good.
I wore it at my wedding, and have otherwise, it's served me well.
A quick question. You know, you're a dynamic guy. I see you on the Supreme Court, but I also see you as a senator. Have you thought about the political side of this?
No. In all seriousness, anyone that is involved in public policy, in debating important issues of the day, cannot look in the mirror and say, this is what I want to be. I will tell you, I am a humble servant, currently serve my clients. I'm working very hard on their behalf. I have no aspirations but to be on the Iowa Supreme Court currently. And, you know, quite frankly, my wife is as open-minded as I am. In fact, she said that if I ever wanted to run for office again, it could be in 20 or 30 years. So with that experience, you know, quite frankly, I have no political ambitions currently and really hope that I can be a key contributor to the Iowa Supreme Court.
You may have to run in 2 years if you get this job.
I'm comfortable with the retention vote. I understand what that entails. And, you know, quite frankly, I think it'd be a great opportunity for whoever is selected in this process to be validated. And if they're retained or not retained, that will be, again, That's the will of the people, and I'm comfortable with that.
Well, we thank you very much, but before you leave, you need to introduce some of your guests and family, because we like to give them FaceTime on the camera.
Right. Well, I mean, I promised I wouldn't embarrass anybody, and my wife specifically asked that I not introduce her, but immediately behind me is my wife, Marcy. And then I have friends and family from my law firm and my high school days, and key supporters from Urbandale, and Dan Clute, and my pastor, and Bobby Hansen, and my law partner, and just, you know, some people I really care about. And my closest friend from high school that has known me since 6th grade, and we played football together, and then he went to Iowa State to play, and I went to Iowa. And so, I mean, there's just a lot of friends and key people in my life that I care a lot about, and I wanted to share today with them.
I'm glad you brought Mr. Hanson, because I need to ask him why he missed the neighborhood holiday party.
You can ask him that now. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.